Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. So, okay, let's just do a quick quiz. What were the, or not necessarily all, but what was the step? There were 9 steps of bhakti we talked about in the beginning, and what was the step that was supposed to be discussed in those first 3 verses? Do you remember what was the first step of that 9 processes?
Shravanam, Prabhu, hearing.
Shravanam, no, Madhi, it was not. I was talking about the. I don't know if you were, probably you were there, but we talked about Shraddha. Then we talked about bhajan, Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajan Kriya, Anartha Nivritti. So that's it. So, and let me pull up that slide. It's good that we can just go over it again quickly. I think it was in the first verse. I might have brought it up. It's going to take. It was not in the first one. It was probably in the introduction. NOI overview.
Prabhu, Shraddha.
Is this Prabhuji Sravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam? No.
No, not that.
No, Matish. Let me share this. Let me share my screen. Just give me 1 second. I'll give us. It's good that we can look at it again. And where's it come from? So what we talked about was that at the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we have 9 stages of bhakti, starting with Shraddha. Then we go to Sadhu Sangha, that's association with devotees. Then we do performance of devotional service. Then when we complete those first 3 steps, then we are somewhere around that. It's not a fixed, as I said, it's not fixed. We take a proper initiation. We make a commitment to the whole process. Then we go into Anartha Nivritti, our unwanted attachments decrease, and that's the longest phase. Anartha Nivritti is the longest phase. We might be stuck in it for years and years. But if we are consistent and sincere, then Krishna and Guru intervene, and then we can move on to the further steps. So I think I have it somewhere. Okay, so the first 3 texts were Shraddha. What that means is that to develop faith, we need to do those activities and not do the other ones, right? So we had a list of activities. First one was Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodh Vegam, Jibha Vegam, Udarupastha Vegam, Etan Vegan Yuvisahita Dhira, Sarvam Apiman, Prithvim Tashishyas. So that's the first step. That what are we supposed to do? And it's not that we are supposed to do all of that and then we get Shraddha. No. In the 7th canto, we are told that super soul sitting in our heart, it gives us intelligence according to our austerities and however according to our sincerity. There's a verse in the 7th canto, 14th chapter. It tells us that, Prabhupada tells us that, so whatever effort and sincerity I put in, Krishna from within my heart starts giving me that faith also accordingly. So it's not that first I will be all the 6, I'll have all my Vegas in control and then Shraddha will happen. It starts to happen automatically. And then not do things we're not supposed to do. Atyahara, Priyasascha, Prajalpo, Niyamagraha, Jansanga, Lollinja. And then the do's. Utsaha Nishya Dhairya, Tat Karma Pravartanat, Sangatyaga Shato Vritti, Sadbir Bhakti Prasiddhi. All those activities go into Shraddha. They make our faith. Now we are going into text 4. Now 4 to 6 will tell us first what should we do when we, or let me just say that, how to discriminate between devotees. And when I say discriminate, and you have to be clear that discriminate is different than judgment. Discriminate means that it's based on Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. Judgment is based on my mental speculation. So we never judge any devotees. Frankly, we don't judge anybody. We are not in that business. But we should know how to discriminate between devotees also. And we'll go through that in the next verses. How to discriminate, find out who the devotee is and what his position is, and how do we reciprocate with him or her. Then when we have devotees, what should we do with them? And then the 6th verse tells us that how we should not look at the outwardly feature of a devotee. Right? Some devotees might not be very good looking. They might not be very effulgent. Some might have some bodily defect. So that comes in the 6th verse. So 4 to 6 give us a very clear picture how to associate with devotees, how to know which devotee to associate with, and how to behave with that devotee. So that's where we are kicking off today. So I just wanted to bring this up so that we know the whole process where we are. And Another thing, as we keep going into this process, as we keep going deeper into the verses, the message will get more and more concentrated. So it's good if you have a flow and you have that momentum and you have understanding, because once you come to anartha nivritti and then nishta, steadiness, and then prema, ruchi, all that, it becomes a very heartfelt connection with Krishna. So we have to be careful. As I said, it becomes concentrated, so we also have to have a proper understanding of that. So let's kick off the fourth verse. Is it fourth verse? Just 1 second. Verse 4. Okay.
I have one quick question. So
Yes, Prabhu.
you just gave us the understanding of this. I like how it's broken down. The first I noticed, I heard you speaking, I was listening, but now today I noticed the breakdown 1 through 3, 4 through that. Now that is an amazing capsulization of each thing so that you can get a clear understanding. And so when you were explaining just now the Shraddha and those different points, so I can access that somewhere here too? The points
The slide deck, you mean, Prabhu?
Yeah.
I have those also in my Google. I've shared that link. Probably we both can sit down sometime. I can bring that all on your desktop so that you have easy access. Let's do that someday.
Because that's something I can sit and speak to someone if you break it down like that and have the proper grasp of how it's progressing like you just did. I just caught that, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, surely, Prabhu. Let's sit down someday and we can have a clear picture. I have all these slides, whatever I present, I have them in my Google folder, and I can clear that to you. Okay, right, verse 4. Would somebody like to read it? Always it's good to read Sanskrit and memorize if you're interested in memorizing, but it's always good to do that. Somebody wants to read the verse.
I can do it.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Great. You want me to go, Prabhuji?
Yes, please go ahead, Mati.
Dadati pratigrinati guhyam akshati prachati bhukte bhojayate chaiva satvidham priti lakshanam. Do you want me to read the translation?
Let's just do the Sanskrit if anybody else wants to do it also. Somebody else wants to give it a try too?
Prabhuji, I can do it.
Yes, Prabhu.
Taddati pratigrahanati guhyam akhyati prachati bhunkte bhojayante chaiva shadvidham priti lakshanam.
Thank you. Okay, one more if somebody else wants to give a try. One more. We'll move forward.
Can I try, Prabhuji?
Yes, please.
Tadati pratigrihanti guhyam akhyati prachati bhunakte bhojayate chaiva tadavidham priti lakshanam.
Thank you. Can please mute yourself? Thank you. Yes, so offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So now, as we said, sadhu sangha. Now we're in sadhu sangha. How do we reciprocate with devotees? So Prabhupada, in the purport, he will explain how ISKCON perfectly fulfills this principle of dadati pratigranati guhyam akhyati prachati bhunkte bhojate chaiva. Then he will go into more details. He'll say how charity and chanting is an example of dadati. And last but not the least, Prabhupada, always like a perfect teacher, Acharya, he also tells us whom to associate with, whom not to associate with, and why not to associate with them. We need that also. It's not just, we always want to minimize the negative and add the positives in our life. That's the goal of bhakti. We cannot have the negatives, we cannot keep them along with us and also expect that positive changes will keep happening to us. It doesn't work that way. We have to shed off the negatives as we move forward. So, Prabhupada, before we get into this, one question that comes, let me even go back here. The first thing it says, 6 symptoms of love shared by devotee with another, right? So, sadhu sangha means association. Association is being elaborated in this verse. So even before we learn to associate with Krishna, which will come later on in this book, there are only 11 verses in this book. So we'll quickly be on that path where we'll be associating with Krishna. We have to learn how to associate with the devotees of Krishna. That is why this verse is of great importance. Right? So the whole stress of this verse is, tadati pratigranati guhyam akhyati prachati, is belongingness, how to have a heart-to-heart connection with devotees, and how to create the sense of belongingness with devotees. So before we take a dive into this, I would like to ask you this question: what does association mean for you? What can you define it in one short sentence? What is association? If somebody asks you that, what would you say? Anyone wants to give it a try?
Sharing your heart to someone, with someone.
Giving your heart, you said?
Sharing what's in your heart. with
Sharing
someone.
heart. Yeah, that's a very good thing. Yes, sharing our hearts. What else is another aspect of association?
Discussing Prabhuji Vedic literature, clarifying any doubt that we have relating to any of the topic that we are not able to understand.
Yes, that's very well said. Yes, associating means discussing Shastra with them. Yeah.
Doing kirtan together.
Yeah, doing kirtan together.
Doing
So
chanting. Association can be in any form, right? Prabhuji, doing chanting together. So any way that any devotee can help us progress in the path of the spirituality. That is what association is all about.
yes, that's a good point. Anybody who can help us grow. So when we associate with someone, we lend our consciousness to someone. We influence them through our thoughts, through our feelings, and we can influence their decision making by our thoughts, words, and actions. It's a dynamic relationship, right? We can influence somebody can influence us, and that's association. So our growth in bhakti depends on how well we can understand this dynamics of association, right? So when we do these 6 things, we are participating in a loving bond with other person. So to advance our bhakti, first stage we talked about was Shraddha. We were going to regulate our lives. And what will that do is that will bring us to the mode of goodness. We'll control senses, do's, don'ts. And the last, when we read the third verse, right, where was third verse was Utsaha Nishchat Dharya Tat Karma Pravartanat Sangha Tyage Shato Vritte. Shato Vritte, what we read was associating or following sadhus. And so now, because we ended with that, Rupa Goswami is bringing us association now, because he ended with that association with sadhus, with devotees, is takes you forward, and now he's going to elaborate upon that, right? So unfortunately, in today's era, in Kali Yuga, there is so much of miscommunication. There is disagreements among families. Within families, there is so much of disagreement, and all that, the disagreement, that miscommunication, that triggers negative thoughts in our hearts, that makes us hypocritical sometimes. It makes me dishonest. And that creates an environment of faithlessness. We as human beings are sentient beings. You might have heard the word sentient. So we are sentient beings. And when I say sentient, means I can sense what the other person is doing to me. If let's say, a husband keeps telling his wife that I love you 24/7, he just keeps saying I love you, I love you. But the moment the wife comes sit in front of him, he just gets engaged on his phone. Now, even though verbally he's saying that he loves her, but then his activity, the way he's presenting, the wife can sense that he doesn't mean it. So that leaves us. So that's what it means by being a sentient being, that we can sense what the other person is thinking in his heart. not necessarily just the word. So that's what is important, that we don't want to have relationships that are hypocritical, that are based on faithlessness, that are shallow. That we don't want those relationships. Because bhakti is all about the heart. We want to have a heartfelt connection with devotees. And that's why this verse is very important for us, that how can we develop that heartfelt connection with devotees. Prabhupada, he starts by quoting, so this all is from the purport. So, understanding of Krishna consciousness is innate in every living entity. A man is known by his company, and if an ordinary man associates with devotees, he will certainly develop his dormant Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada used to give that famous example. If you want to be a drunkard, what do? You hang out with drunkards. You want to be a devotee, what do? You hang out with devotees. Prabhupada starts by quoting 2.62. Dhyayato vishayan pumsham sangashteshu upjayate. Sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodo abhijayate. That when we have a desire in the heart, we look for similar associations. And when I associate with them, then that brings lust in my heart. And then lust eventually, when it's not satisfied, brings krodha, and then it goes on. Krodho, Brahma, Sambriti, it kind of clouds my intelligence, and it just keeps going. 2.63 also. That's the first verse Prabhupada is giving to corroborate that how valuable association is. Then he goes on to the next verse. He says, Nitya Siddha Prema Sadhya Kabhunaya Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Kare Udaya. Right? So that means that pure love for Krishna in our heart is established by associating with others, by hearing, by chanting, as Shalini Mataji was saying, that we can hear with devotees, we can chant with them, and then the love awakens in our heart. Right? Nitya Siddha Prem Krishna Prema. Krishna Prema opens up in our heart. And the most important is Shikshashtakam. Cheto Darpanam Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. So the heart is like a mirror on which a thick layer of dust is accumulated. And by associating with the right kind of people, that dust gets cleaned, and eventually I can see who I am. That's the purpose, right? So that can happen. So now, if you notice that the three parts there are dadati pratigranati, guhyam akhyati prachati, and bhukte bhojate chaiva. Both of these, dadati pratigranati, that is giving gifts and taking gifts, bhukte bhojate chaiva, offering somebody prasadam and accepting prasadam from somebody, all that is meant to establish guhyam akhyati prachati. The word guhyam means confidential, akhyati prachati means talking confidentially with somebody. So it's really important that confidentiality is the most important aspect of any relationship. If somebody speaks to you and then you just go and tell that to somebody else, you'll not have faith on that person. So it has to be guhyam. So your heart should open with somebody whom you have full faith upon, that you can gain from his or her association, and then also that that person will not take whatever you're saying casually. He or she will not just start speaking to others about it. So guhyam akhyati prachati. So both these, so that's why it's like a sandwich. On top it says a bread, on the bottom there's a bread, but then that you have that vegetable patty in between, right? So that's the main essence of the sandwich. So that's the main essence. The whole purpose of eating and giving gifts is to have that relationship with somebody. Right? So let's start with dadati pratigranati, giving gifts and taking gifts. So whenever we get a gift, the first thing is that we should appreciate it wholeheartedly, because it's not a gift, it's a feeling that comes with it. So my son, many years ago, he was 3 or 4. We were in a store and he found a small frying pan, a very small one, probably tiny, like I'm just showing from my hand this size. And for some reason, it came to his heart that he wanted to give it to our spiritual master. And he was just very adamant. He said, I want to give it. He bought it. He was 3 or 4, and he just picked it up and he gave it to our spiritual master. And our spiritual master was so happy with that. He was I don't know what use must have been to him, but just because the feeling was there, he was so happy with it. And he still remembers it. Whenever he sees my son, that whatever happened must have been like 5 or 6 years ago. But he still remembers it. And whenever he meets my son, he kind of brings that up many times. So when it's about the feeling. So whenever we get a gift, however small or big, we have to appreciate that, right? Then a lot of what we have learned in the earlier verses can also be used here, right? Atyahara. Don't try to over collect gifts also. Oh, that people are giving me, so I'll just hold on to it. Prabhupada would give away everything he would get as a gift, right? Right? And some devotee gave him a very costly watch. One day he would see him wearing, next day he would see some other devotee wearing it, some of the other Prabhupada disciples wearing it. So we should give away gifts also, not just trying to collect them. More importantly, we get gifts. All of you might have received something or the other from the deities. Many times, jewelry or dresses of deities, they are given to devotees. So that's a very reverential thing. That's very reverential. That comes in the 11th canto. Uddhava says this to Lord Krishna, that Tvayok bhukta shrag gandha vasho alankara charchita. That flower scent that has been offered to you, then shragandha, and then clothes that you have worn, when you give it out and then devotees use it, they become free from this material world. So the gifts coming from deities, from your spiritual master, they are very reverential. So we should be very reverential towards them. So why to do guhyam akhyati prachirena? So we talked a bit about dadati pratigranati. So any thoughts on that? Why do we have to be confidentially? Why should we open up our heart confidentially to somebody? Any thoughts on that? No thoughts on that? Anybody?
Prabhuji, what did we ask? Why should we open our heart? This is what you asked?
Yeah, why to do guhyam akhyati prachyati? Why to do that? Why should we do
Develop
guhyam?
relation to we open a heart to somebody when we are assured that information will stay with him or her. So we confide in him, right? And that the very thought of confiding in somebody shows that we trust in that relation.
Yes. So by confidentiality, and then yes, you also mentioned doubt clarification earlier. So that's also an important thing in doing guhyam akhyati prachyati, right? So maintaining confidentiality, then there should be no prajalpa. We talked about prajalpa in one of the earlier verses. Prajalpa is just talking about nonsensical worldly matters. You rarely meet devotees anywhere, if you meet them and you start talking about worldly affairs, what's the use? You can talk about that to anybody. You can talk about that to your people at work. You don't need devotees for that. So whenever we meet devotees, we have to discuss confidential matters, discuss Shastra with them, discuss Krishna Katha with them. And then, but it's not that straightforward. It's not that easy to develop that relationship, right? Because everything in this world is kind of topsy-turvy in today's Kali Yuga, right? Nowadays, people are running after feelings, if you notice. That's what happens, right? Everybody's looking for a feeling of love. And when something goes wrong, people say, I don't feel love in this relationship. So, but then in the Shastras, if you go back and read Shastras deeply, you'll understand that Acharyas tell us that the feeling of love is not for neophytes. It's not for neophytes. Right? Feeling of love is actually the topmost. So when we see those 9 steps, right, we go from Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajan Kriya, Anartha Nivriti, Nishta, Prema, Ruchi, and then it comes somewhere on the top. It comes Prema comes right up on top. Bhava, Prema. So love comes after is the last step. Unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, everybody wants love right now. The first thing they want is love. They want that feeling of love, right? So we want the end result right in the beginning. And that's why everything is so topsy-turvy in this world. So there are 3 parts. Some of you might have heard about it. So there is Sambandha. Sambandha is the theory of the relationship. Who am I? Who is Krishna? What is my relationship with him? Abhideya is the next step. That practicing those principles that govern that relationship, right? Subordinating your feelings to that duty. So that's Abhīṣṭa. And then comes Prayojan. Prayojan is the end result, which is love. And so the Bhakti teaches us that you have to start not right from the feeling. You have to start from the other opposite end. At least learn of the relationship, learn to do some service. How can you expect love right in the beginning? Right? That's why nowadays, unfortunately, most of the marriages, they just start with that principle of love. Right? It begins from Prayojan right in the beginning, in the material world nowadays. In the past, if you know, people criticize that, there was, marriages used to happen much earlier on in the ages, 10, 15 years age, girls and boys would get married. But there was a big, strong reason and a sensible, rationale behind that. When somebody married, when the kids were not necessarily kids, but when a girl and boy, they would be married, and they would know that this is the person they're going to spend their lives with. They don't necessarily start living together at that young age, right? So they were taught to be dutiful towards each other first. That was the first thing, right? They were taught, the wife, when the husband, the boy would go to the girl's house and the girl would serve the boy, and then so that it's not that they just jump into having a physical relationship. That was a strict no-no. So the first step was understanding what the sambandh is, what the relationship is, and then the Abhīṣṭa, practicing it dutifully towards each other. Eventually, by staying like that with one person, you will start to develop a feeling for them. And you will accept them as they are, because now you have been taught to follow dutifully. You will learn to reciprocate with them, and that will bring out the feeling of love. That's what happens. That's why marriage used to happen at a much early age in the past. Sometimes we just start criticizing many of those so-called rituals in the past, that without understanding the rationale behind them. So it was not that, nowadays everybody wants freedom, that, I should have the freedom of marrying whomever I want at whatever age I want. Yeah, that's it. But then that's why the whole infrastructure is falling apart, because the whole process is not followed of Sambandh, Abhīṣṭa, and Prayojan. So that is why we also have to have that relationship accordingly. Okay. So I just wanted to bring that concept out of why feeling of love doesn't happen right in the beginning. There has to be some effort and duty on our part before we jump into that. Okay, so all the culture of romance that we have in today's world is a complete opposite of what Shastras are trying to teach us, right? We have the classical story of Rukmini and Krishna. So Rukmini didn't meet Krishna. Rukmini just heard about Krishna, and that developed a love in her heart. And then she wrote a letter to Krishna, right? So when she wrote, and then we have, we have all the pastimes of Rukmini and Krishna, Krishna teasing her and all that. So in the scriptures, God has not given us anything that He does not Himself follow. So that's the beauty of the scriptures. So that they have that relationship of Rukmini and Krishna that follows very well in the process that I was just explaining, right? So let's now go a bit forward. So now the first thing that Prabhupada is doing is telling us how the process of all those processes are very well fulfilled by ISKCON, by ISKCON. That's it. So Prabhupada, this is all coming from the purport. I just made it more in a graph in a way that it could be easily understood. Dadati, people donate. So there are life members whom ISKCON enlists, and then they donate to ISKCON, and in turn we give them books and magazines. Then they invite us to their houses. Then we go and we honor Prasad, and vice versa. We invite them to the temple. There are so many festivals. We have Narsingh Chaturdashi coming in. We just celebrate Ram Navami. So we invite people to the temple. We hold festivals, and then they come and they honor Prasadam. And then lastly, what happens is that when they become more conducive to the process, they start inquiring about devotional service. And nearly everyone, I know, so many people, they just come through this process. When I started this whole bhakti process, I used to go to the temple just to eat prasadam on that Sunday evening. I wouldn't even go for the class, just at the time of prasadam I used to go. But then I met devotees there. They were so nice to me. And then I started asking them questions, so very stupid ones for sure. And they answered me. They were very patient with me, and that helped the little bit of faith in my heart to establish that yes, I want to continue on this path. So that's why ISKCON is perfectly designed to fulfill these principles given in this verse. So that's the brilliance of Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave us everything that we need for our bhakti to excel and to go back and back within ISKCON, within his books. Right? So that's something to understand here, that how do members of ISKCON and devotees, how they interact with each other, right? Then Prabhupada is talking about bhunkte bhojate chaiva. So once, what happened, I'll tell you a quick story. Once Prabhupada, many of you might know that Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnujan Swami Maharaj were Prabhupada's very early disciples. They both were sannyasis. They had this Radha Damodar bus party. Right. So what the bus party used to do, they had devotees who would just go into the bus. In the bus they had everything. They had arranged the bus in a way that you could sleep in it. They had deities in the bus, and they could cook in the bus. Everything was done there. And the bus was a big hit for ISKCON, and they were making huge profits through distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books. Right. So Srila Prabhupada wanted Tamal Krishna Maharaj to invest some of the earnings of that Radha Damodar bus party into some temples in India. Right? There was there was work on the Mayapur temple, the Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan. So what Prabhupada did was he invited Tamal Krishna Maharaj to India, and then he asked Yamuna Mataji to cook a sumptuous meal for them. Right? And Prabhupada made Maharaj sit beside him and eat, and he made sure that all the food that was cooked was one of the favorites of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And so then he fed him, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was so happy that he was sitting with his spiritual master, and Prabhupada was so humble. And then Prabhupada asked him for the money to come to India. As a spiritual master, Prabhupada could have just asked right away, right? And I just give the money. Nobody could have said no. But Prabhupada was very careful, that he knew that if I asked directly, then Tamal Krishna Maharaj would think that, oh, I don't want to give this money. Tamal Krishna Maharaj could say no, right? But then the way Prabhupada asked it, the diplomacy that Prabhupada brought about in his relationship, that was so pleasant to his disciple, that the disciple, just was ready to give everything. So what I want to stress upon is that we have to, even though the relationship might be of a junior or a senior, we never get into that egoistic feeling that, oh, I'm senior, I can do whatever I want to. So wherever we are in that relationship with devotees, we have to be humble and respectful. Diplomacy can come in, no duplicity. Duplicity is a strict no. Krishna doesn't like it, spiritual master doesn't like it, nobody likes it. But you can have diplomacy. Right? And this story is given in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's book, Servant of the Servant. He says that he was so happy, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was so happy to be so-called, you can say, tricked by his spiritual master. Right? Prabhupada knew that if I would directly ask Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he might become egoistic. Oh, no, I don't want to. Why should I give him? We are putting in so much effort. But Prabhupada knew how to deal with the situation. So we have to be also very cautious in how we deal with devotees, how to have those relationships. Junior, senior, we have to be very careful. So that's the having relationships within and without. Let's see what's next. Before I go into this, I want to just see if you have any thoughts or any questions or any points that you would like to bring out. We have been talking about this. It's a very silent crowd. Nice. Amazed. Silent crowd.
Prabhuji, I was going through the text, and it says I understood the point, giving charity, accepting from the devotee, and opening one's mind to the devotee. All that point is understandable. But I could not understand this, inquiring from them about the confidential service of the Lord. What is mean by confidential service of the Lord?
Confidential service of the Lord. See, as we move forward in bhakti, there are many such emotions and many such relationships that we develop with Krishna, which you cannot talk to any common people because they will never understand.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Gaur Govind Maharaj, he was one of Prabhupada's disciples. In 1979, he was dancing in one of the festivals in Mayapur, and he went into an ecstasy. For 4 months, he remained in ecstasy. And so when he came out of that, he didn't know that 4 months had passed. He thought a few minutes had passed. And there was so much that he was going through. One of his disciples even said that he saw the true swaroop of Maharaj, which was of a gopi. He saw a very beautiful lady sitting in the room, and he saw that Maharaj had. But then these things you cannot talk to anybody, not even with every devotee. You cannot talk it because they won't understand it. I don't understand that. When I read that, I was like, I couldn't comprehend it. So you have to know with whom you can talk about what confidential matters. Okay. So this is just one example I gave you. There can be many of them, because many times what happens is that you were chanting and suddenly you had a very deep realization in your heart. But then you also realize that if I tell this to somebody, they might not understand it. They might criticize me. Oh, this is a wrong thought to have. Down deep, it's correct. It's coming right from Krishna. You have that feeling, but you cannot disclose it to everybody. So sometimes we have to be very cautious as to what to speak to others, what not to speak. That's why a relationship has to be developed before we can open up our hearts. Was that helpful, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any more points before we jump on further? We'll talk about chanting and charity, but before that, I wanted to talk more about our relationship with our family members. How do we do that? Nothing? Okay. So coming to family members, sometimes we make a mistake that we consider material relationships to be demoniac. That's a very common thing happening in bhakti. When I came in, I heard that. I know many devotees have that. But we should realize that we have to have relationship with family also. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out that Sakta karmani avidvamsho yatha kurvanti bharta kuryad vidvams tatha saktas chikirshur loka sangraham. So what he said was that chikirshur, you have to do activities that are for the welfare of people, right? So we cannot just ignore our family, or we cannot ignore our relatives. So we have to intelligently figure out ways by which we can not let them affect our bhakti, but then we also not offend them. Our goal in general, and Prabhupada has given this to us, is that we should try to sow as much goodness as we can in this world. And then what's more, we should not expect goodness coming back from the same quarter, right? We should just do good, right? So try to do good to your family, but don't expect that they will start reciprocating the same way. That today, many of the devotees do that. I do that many times. I call up my father and say, oh, you should be chanting. And my father is like, who are you to tell me? You're just a kid, and I brought you up, and I made you sensible enough that you are here talking to me in this way. So your parents don't always understand. So we should know where to draw the line, how to deal with such relationships, so that they could be conducive for their bhakti growth also, and for your growth in bhakti also. And we see that across literature, across scriptures. Mahaprabhu married because of his mother. His mother wanted him to marry. Mahaprabhu is Supreme Personality of Godhead. He came to show what a devotee should live like. But then his mother wanted, he married. On his mother's order, he stayed in Jagannath, so that devotees from Bengal could come and regularly meet him, and then they could go back. So that it was an easy journey. Mahaprabhu did that. Mahaprabhu is Supreme Personality of Godhead. He could have just bluntly said, no, I'm out, I'm gone. So we have to find a way through. Sometimes, as they say, right, you have to win a war, you have to lose some battles. So Sometimes you spend time to please your family. Relationship is a process, and when you keep introspecting and trying to understand what is working for you, what is not working for you in a relationship, then you can sort it out and you can improve upon it. And so, and that's for the family. And even when you, but then also when you're talking to devotees, so I'm asking you to be more favorable to your family so that they can also grow in bhakti. But then when we are with devotees doesn't mean that you kind of everything is okay with devotees. Sometimes you have matters of property, marriage, other things. You have to be very straightforward and very shrewd in them, right? There is in Mayapur, if you go, Mayapur is being developed at a very fast pace. There are buildings coming up. You can buy houses there. There are devotees who are selling houses, devotees who are buying houses. But that doesn't mean you become, oh, devotee, let's forget about all paperwork. No, you have to be very cautious. Property matters, marriage, all that. We have to be very cautious. So there is no harm in being shrewd like a materialist, even with devotees when it comes for those appropriate purposes. And we have to keep practicing all this till we come to the top level of bhakti. Right? At that point, at the top level, we will love everyone despite of however they treat us. So that position is completely, at least for me, it's way far off to even understand. So understand that how we have relationship with our family, and then how we have a relationship with devotees. So that's an important part I just wanted to bring out before we move on to chanting and charity. So chanting and charity. Prabhupada is highlighting this in the purport that both of them are acts of dadati, giving. Right? So chanting, what happens in chanting is, how is it a dadati pratigranati relationship? When we chant, and when we're chanting very sincerely, that's a direct relationship with Krishna. Right? Krishna is abhinatva nama namino. He's not different from his name. There's a direct relationship with Krishna. And when we do dadati, Krishna also does dadati with us. He reciprocates. So, and chanting, as we talked about earlier, chanting is also a greatest thing that we can do with devotees. So it's obviously it's a relationship with Krishna, but then it's also a relationship with devotees. Right? We do Krishna Katha when we meet with other devotees. Haridas Thakur, when Prabhupada gives the example of Haridas Thakur, who said that by chanting, everyone will be liberated. That's why Haridas Thakur used to suggest that you should chant out loudly. Mahaprabhu asked him this, that why should we chant loudly? So he says that by chanting loudly, people, there are so many living entities in your area when you are chanting, they get benefit out of it. And we have the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going through the Jharikhanda jungle, where all the animals were dancing and chanting. And we cannot obviously do that. Prabhupada says this in the purport, that we cannot make animals dance. We are not of that purity. But we can help people by bringing them to Krishna consciousness through the process of chanting. Across the world, ISKCON has so many chanting parties, Sankirtan parties that go out, and that attracts people. Just when that sound that falls on their ears and then eventually goes into the bay of their heart, it purifies them. And then their true nature starts to show, and then they connect with devotees. Right? So that is why Prabhupada is highlighting on the concept of chanting as dadati. Right? Whoever participates in that chanting, their spiritual life takes off. Might be in this life, might not be, but whoever hears to that chanting, that wherever you're doing it, they get benefit out of it. Right? So that's how, and then Prabhupada explains in the purport how do we do it in ISKCON? We do chanting, dancing, and feasting. Right? So what happens in Kali Yuga, whenever you start talking about philosophy, people leave. That happens very often. You might have seen that. So therefore, Prabhupada figured out then when people they are not in a state of consciousness to receive the philosophy, you give them prasadam. He would ask them to chant. He would ask them to take prasadam. Many people would come to attend feast, then they would invite devotees to their homes. Prabhupada would go to great length, just to, he would be invited to many people's houses, and even though the food was not perfect and up to the mark as Prabhupada is used to it, but he would eat the food just because then he could attract that person to the process of bhakti. but that takes an Uttam Adhikari like Prabhupada to do that. Okay. So then comes the process of, we talked about chanting, right? Giving the holy name. We talked about Haridas Thakur Mahaprabhu. And then we also should be willing to receive the holy name. What that means is, willing means that we should be eager to be a part of kirtans. Right? It doesn't mean that, oh, I chant, I am a devotee, I don't need all that. Right? We should be also be involved in that. And Prabhupada later on in the purport says that this chanting process, is that? Okay, I'm not sure. Okay. The chanting process, what happens is that when we are chanting and we are glorifying Krishna, at that time, at least for that particular moment, our ego is subdued, because it's not about my ego, it's not about your ego, we are glorifying somebody else. So the whole process becomes more conducive, it becomes peace and tranquility prevails when that is being done. So that helps in eradicating the negativity out of people's hearts. And that's why Prabhupada is stressing upon chanting as a principle of Dadati. Keeping Krishna in the center of everything, and our relationship with others, our relationship with ourselves, all that keeping Krishna in the center, then our life becomes more conducive for our growth, and we move forward in the process, go to Nishtha, Ruchi, Prema, we go that way, right? So we have to be, we have to understand the principle of Dadati at multiple levels. So next principle of Dadati is charity. Before I go that, any thoughts on the principle of chanting, or any questions, or any need any more? Do we need to understand that further? Okay. Next principle of Dadati is charity, which Prabhupada is giving us. Now, it's this particular part here is the charity part, and we'll talk about these three different statements Prabhupada has in the purport. Okay. So, how does charity work in Krishna consciousness? Let's understand that first. So, what does spending for Krishna consciousness mean? When you cook for Krishna, you organize Krishna conscious activities. You invite devotees to your home, or other devotees invite you. You might have deities at home, and you're serving deities, buying clothes for your deities, jewelry for your deities, cooking for them. Then you go to yatras. There are so many yatras that many senior devotees conduct. You might be going to yatras, you're spending money there. Yatra means yana trayate iti. So that means yatra means anything that delivers you from the cycle of birth and death. So that's by going to a place. That's what yatra. Similarly, like mantra, right? So mantra is manha trayate. So anything that liberates your heart. So that's manha trayate. So just the word yatra and mantra, they're similar, sound similar. So all that is included in the charity. Okay. So now Prabhupada is bringing out this first principle. Advanced devotees give 50%. So I'm not an advanced devotee, so I don't give 50%. But I invest my money, I try to my best of my capacity to cook food for Krishna. I have deities at home. I give gifts, buy gifts for devotees, invite devotees at home. We go to yatra to India, we go to dham, all that. So that's also considered as charity in Krishna consciousness. So don't be just bit overwhelmed by the number 50%. That's first of all, Prabhupada is saying that's only for advanced devotees, and it also includes all the other things that we are doing. Also includes as charity. So all that are the activities. Now comes charity to the temple. Okay, Prabhupada at many points, and also many senior devotees, they say that 10% we should make it a point that we should give 10% to Krishna. Right? We should conduct our organizational and personal affairs in a way that people are inspired to give charity without even asking. So when we behave in a way that, that we are getting so much by investing our time and effort and, by giving charity to the temple, that people also get attracted to do that. So people don't give money to an organization. Never. I don't give money to an organization. I give money to people. I see people who are involved in the process. They are so, they seem benefiting so much from the process that I also want to be like them, and then I give to the temple. right? And we are giving when things are not even perfect with us. That's also a point we have to be. So we should not take charity as something of, oh, I'm just giving money to the temple. No. Charity is an act of purification. It helps purify my heart. It helps cut down my attachments. And that is why charity is a very essential concept in bhakti. We have to have charity, right? You might have heard of, in which book was it? Radhanath Swami Maharaj, second book. What was the Journey? Anybody knows the name of the second book? I don't remember. The first one was Journey Home. What was the second one? Journey. Okay. Journey Within. Journey Within. Yes. In that, there is a beautiful story of Sindhu Tai. And some of you might have heard it. I know Maharaj talks about it quite often. So Sindhu Tai, she was married at a young age. Her husband was a drunkard, and he kicked her out of the house. I don't remember the exact reason, but she was just kicked out when she was pregnant with her daughter. She went and stayed in the cow shed, gave birth to her daughter, and she would beg on the railways. But a very good quality in her was that if she had any extra, she would feed other beggars out. So following dharma, even if earning is not too much, just to do it because it is dharma, because Krishna has said it is dharma. In the 17th chapter, when we come to Bhagavad Gita, we'll read Krishna tells us that charity is in three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So we have to try to be, so charity is very critical for our bhakti, right? So to develop faith and move forward with that path, it's very important. So if you haven't done so, get a financial advisor, figure out your retirement plans, keep an amount for charity in there. And it's not just in our practice. Every practice across the world, you go to Christianity, Islam, anybody, they all have a concept of charity. And forget about that. Talk about people, billionaires, right? Every billionaire has a concept of charity. You'll not believe it. I recently read an article in Forbes.com that in 2020 alone, in United States, the charity was of $471 billion. Can you imagine? Of these top 25 billionaires, they gave close to $200 billion. Top 25 billionaires, you're talking about Warren Buffett, you're talking about Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, the Amazon guy, his ex-wife, all these big shots there. Right? They gave nearly 170 or $200 billion in charity. And now you can just ask that, why do they give charity? Well, why do they have to give charity? Right? Simple reason is that they give, that they have this concept in their mind. They have this understanding that when they give wealth, it expands. Right? More comes back to them in some form or the other. It could be a sense of satisfaction. It could be more money. It could be, much a better position in this world, or whatever it may be. We as devotees are not doing it for that purpose. We are just here to please Krishna and do it as a dharma. But then all the billionaires are putting in money, right? And they also understand that how by giving the social and economic value, what's the social and economic value of that investment that they're putting in, right? And scientifically, it's been proved. People who give charity, it engages the same pleasure centers in our brain when you see your loved one, when you're eating your favorite food, you eat you're getting some loving gifts from somebody. It ignites those exact same parts in our brain, same pleasure centers in our brain. Generosity, giving money. It improves our health and long-term happiness. And all these billionaires, they have realized that. So they give in charity. That is why charity is critical for us. We should give in charity. What was that? Is there a question or a thought that somebody was sharing? No? Okay. So that's why charity is there. So Rupa Goswami's principle Prabhupada is talking about. So Rupa Goswami, Prabhupada talks about it, and Chaitanya Charitamrita talks about it. The story of Rupa Goswami, how when he realized that he was in a very well-to-do place in the Muslim government. He was I think a topmost minister or some of that sort. He came to know that Mahaprabhu is coming, and he wanted to leave all that and just surrender to Mahaprabhu. So what he did was, he gave 50% to the Brahmanas, 25% to his family, and kept 25% for his own use for later purposes. And then he just I think I got that number correct, right? 50, 25. It's given in the purport. You can check if I made a mistake there. But so what Rupa Goswami had, that he didn't want to keep anything for himself. He just was, okay, let's distribute it. And so that was Rupa Goswami's principle. And then Prabhupada says that 50% of income to serve Krishna and devotees. And that I mentioned to you how we are doing that. We are serving Krishna deities at home, and we are cooking for Krishna. So a major chunk of our charity goes in that also. Okay? So and it also is brought out as a concept in third chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna clearly says that yagya shishtasi no santo muchyate sarva kilvisha bhunjate te to agham papam ye pachanti atma karanat. Whoever is just keeping it to himself or herself is eating papa, agham papa, is eating papa, because they didn't offer it first. They didn't give as a charity. So whenever we get into that concept of taking without giving, then everything becomes rotten. And that's very well exemplified. Prabhupada, we talked about Yamuna Mataji last time, right? How she was determined to serve Prabhupada. So Prabhupada personally trained Yamuna Mataji in cooking. And Yamuna Mataji is a fantastic cook. She's famous all over the world. She has cookbooks. And what Prabhupada trained her, after a few years, Prabhupada asked her that why are the other devotees not cooking? So Yamuna Mataji, she said in a simplicity that, I'm cooking, so, why do we need other devotees? I'm here to cook. But Prabhupada insisted that she should train others nicely in the process, in the service of cooking. And when Yamuna Mataji questioned him that why is that? Prabhupada said, if you don't give the knowledge that you have received, or in broader sense, when you don't give something that you have gained through Krishna, then you develop envy and pride. Right? So when we are not giving, all that becomes rotten and we fall down. This all becomes we become very egoistic, very self-centered. Right? And when we give, it protects us. It protects us from our own anarthas of envy and pride. So it's conducive for our own personal growth also. Right? And when we give somebody, and it's not just about money, when you give anything, when you preach to somebody, when you give Krishna consciousness to somebody, Krishna will mercifully supply us with nice realizations. Right? And when we see it as a bigger picture, that there's some preaching I'm doing, I'm sharing it with others, and then I'm getting some realization, some bliss, and it reminds me of Krishna, and then it strengthens my relationship with Krishna. And it propels us forward and forward. That's why giving is very, very important. Right? So this results in a constant engagement in service of the Lord by giving. Right? That's why charity is very, very important. Shastras speak about it. When Yudhishthira Maharaj was exiled, he would take care of around 60,000 brahmacharis. They were being fed by him and being maintained by him. He made arrangements for them for the rest of those 14 years when they were gone, 14, 13, 14, they were gone, that they should be maintained. Right? I might not have to give charity right now, but I should never forget that that's my dharma. So I should figure out my life accordingly. When Vasudev and Devaki were in jail, when Krishna was born, Vasudev offered charity mentally. Right? And when he was out of the jail, he did it actually. So the bigger concept being, when we give, we're getting rid of negative attachments, all that negativity, envy, pride, etc. By giving, we become established in our practice, the practice of bhakti that we are sincerely trying to follow. Right? So that's very important. So that's what is the concept of charity. I really like this. This is coming from Prabhupada's purport. He was giving two definitions of religion. What is religion? So religion is the special function of human society, and it constitutes the distinction between human society and animal society. So that's where the distinction comes between us. Animals also do what? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. We see that from Prabhupada's purports. Human beings also do that. How am I different? I have a consciousness and I can use that to uplift myself. Then, when a religious system develops and turns into love of God, it is successful. Merely having a religion doesn't help us. It has to have a goal. Right? 1.2.6 Prabhupada is quoting there. Savai pumsham paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje. Ahituki apratihata yayatma suprashidati. That religion, the biggest religion is Savai pumsham paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje. Love for God, bhakti. Then our religion becomes successful. Otherwise, we'll just keep coming back and forth in this cycle of human beings, animals, back human beings and animals. So that concept is something that we have to understand. So the last part that we have here is about Srila Prabhupada. He is quoting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is telling us not to associate with Mayavadis and atheists. What is your understanding of who's a Mayavadi? A question for all of you. We use this word quite often. Prabhupada uses it quite often. Who's a Mayavadi? Who's Prabhupada talking about here?
Who is fully immersed? Sorry, go ahead, please, Mataji, please.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Karmis, Prabhuji, they are the Mayavadis who believe in doing labor, continuously working to get money and achieve sense gratification. The Karmis.
Well, Karmis, yeah, you can say that there's an overlap there. But then Karmis are even, Karmis are slightly different. But yes, I see that there's an overlap. I agree with you. Yes, Prabhu, somebody else also had another thought.
Yeah, folks that completely believe in sense gratification. They have desires. They just want to accumulate wealth, accumulate power, authority.
Yeah. Okay.
Prabhuji, impersonalist, right?
Well,
I'm mixing too many things, I think. So
yeah, there are too many things.
Karmis.
Attachment, Prabhuji, attachment, that people attached with so many things together.
Attached means attached to material things, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, let me give a definition that the way I understand it. So Mayavadis, that's why Prabhupada calls them Mayavadis, and they're called Mayavadis because they are in Maya, and as you rightly said, they are so much attached to Maya. But there's one thing that really makes them stand out, which makes them really so close to atheists and as demoniac, is that even though Shastras, they have read the Shastras, they have read that Krishna has a form, Krishna is a person, still they refuse to accept it, and they propagate completely opposite philosophy of impersonalism. So impersonalism can be of two types: Mayavadis, and then there are Brahmavadis. Okay, I might be getting into too much technicality there, but just bear with me for a minute. I wanted to clarify this meaning of Mayavadi. Brahmavadis are those who are innocent. They have no idea of the personal form of God. We see the example of Sukadev Goswami. The moment he was born, he said, I'm going to the jungle. I don't want to associate, because he was an impersonalist. Impersonalism is not wrong. He was an impersonalist, but then when he went to the jungle, Vyasadeva sent some of his disciples to chant some beautiful verses from Bhagavatam, Aho Bakiyam Stanakala Kutam, and they sing that verse. And then he thinks about that. Who are they talking about? Who is this person who is so merciful? I've never heard of him. So then they become devotees. So though they are Brahmavadis, there's no harm in that. They're not wrong. But Mayavadis are those who, even after reading everything, after knowing Krishna has a form, all the scriptures telling him, Ishopanishad talks about, Hiranmayena Patrena Satyasthapita Mukham. He talks about a face that Krishna has. And Bhagavatam is full of descriptions of Krishna's beauty. He puts a peacock feather. He has a Kaustubha jewel that has a calf engraved onto it. So many beautiful things about Krishna. But they still refuse to follow that out of their own lack of intelligence, out of their own stupidity. They are Mayavadis. I just wanted to clarify that here, because Mayavadi is being talked here, and when we read Prabhupada's books, Mayavadi's word is going to come again and again. So you have to understand that Mayavadis are at fault because they refuse to accept even after reading the scriptures, even after knowing the truth. Right? I am in Bhakti. I have come here. I know what is the right path. So I am more severe of a offender in comparison to that person who has no idea of bhakti. If I give up bhakti and I say, oh no, bhakti is useless, I am a more serious offender. So same way, Mayavadis are more serious offenders because even after knowing everything, they refuse to accept. And that's the meaning of Mayavadi. And you, as you said, because they are in Maya, all of you, as you were pointing out, that's they are in Maya. They are attached not necessarily to gross material elements, but more subtle material elements. Their own pride, prestige. That, oh, I'm not going to accept it. I'm special. I'm different. I want to present myself as different. All that nonsensical thoughts. So Mayavadis are those. And the atheists, as we all know, who don't believe in God, who are actually against the principle of God. So what Prabhupada tell us? Was that clear to everybody before I jump further? Yes, no, yes. Anything? Did the concept of Mayavadi was it clear to you?
So Prabhuji, how it is different from impersonalist? Impersonalists are the one, they also don't believe in any form of God, right? They believe
Yes, so
in
the impersonalist is a much broader term, and that can be meant to either convey Brahmavadis or Mayavadis. So it can cover both of them. Yes, you're right. That is why whenever we read, you will see that some places Prabhupada says that impersonalists, impersonalism, he doesn't claim that impersonalism is demoniac at some places, you will see. So there he's talking specifically about people who are innocent. They are innocent on that path. They are not, they don't know the truth, as simple as that.
So they are the Gyanis, right?
Oh my God, so many phrases, huh?
No, Prabhuji, Gyanis, because the Gyanis are also the one, right, who believe in the
Jnani Yoga.
and the merging into the effulgence of
Jnani Yoga, the word Jnani means anybody who has knowledge. Okay, so word Gyan, right? Gyan is knowledge, right? Even we are Gyanis, but we are Bhakta Gyanis. We are devotees and we are collecting knowledge, we are gathering knowledge to enhance our bhakti. But then there might be somebody who's collecting knowledge to satisfy his senses. Say, oh, I will feel proud of my knowledge. I'm going to impress people with my knowledge. I know so many verses. I can sing in so many meters. He's also a Gyani. So that's why I wanted to clarify who Mayavadis are, because these phrases are very important to clearly understand Prabhupada's books. Who's a Mayavadi? Who's an impersonalist? You talked about Gyani. Who's a Karmi? Somewhere you will read Karma Kandi. Who's a Karma Kandi now? Is he Karmi or not a Karmi? Right? Then you will go, okay, who's a Sakam Karmi? Who's a Nishkam Karmi? As we go on into this in the books of Prabhupada, all these verses, I'll try my best to clarify those to you. And some of them might already be clear to you, many of you. But it's important we have that clarity to understand whom Prabhupada is talking about. And also from this principle of this chapter, of this verse, we need to know how to respect them, those people. Where do they stand? Once when Prabhupada was in New York, he had a heart attack. He was in the hospital. A big Mayavadi came to meet him. Now, Prabhupada is very critical against Mayavadis in his books. He calls them rascals and whatnot. But when that Mayavadi came, Prabhupada asked his disciple to get off the chair, and he made that Mayavadi sit on there. And he treated him full respect. Right? When Prabhupada came to US, he was staying with the Mayavadi. And he would cook for that Mayavadi. He would feed him. He was so much of respect for that Mayavadi. So it's important that we know who these people are and how we respect them, or how we, reciprocate with them. And it seems that it was not clear enough. So just was it clear? I'm trying to get a feel of what you guys think about it.
But Prabhuji, why should we respect the Mayavadis?
We should respect everybody, Prabhu. Don't disrespect anybody. Every sinner has a future. Every saint has a past. Always remember that. He might be a Mayavadi today. Tomorrow he might become a devotee. He might join ISKCON, and then you will lament, I disrespected him. When Dhruv Maharaj went to when Shuruchi, you might have heard the story of Shuruchi and Suniti. Suniti was Dhruv Maharaj's mother. Shuruchi disrespected Dhruva. He said, you cannot sit on your father's lap. You have to be born out of my womb to sit on his lap. And she said all sorts of things, and it hurt that boy, 5-year-old boy, a lot. Prabhupada explains in the purport in the 8th canto, it's the 8th canto, right? 8th canto, 7th chapter, if I remember correctly. Shuruchi, later on what happens is that Dhruv Maharaj goes to, Dhruv Maharaj goes to the jungle. Dhruv Maharaj's brother, who was born from Shuruchi, he dies in a fire. He was killed by some people, mercilessly. His mother, Shuruchi, out of that anguish and lamentation, she dies. She goes crazy and she dies. Prabhupada explains in the purport, just because she didn't know that Dhruv was a pure devotee, she offended him and she had to suffer because of that. And Prabhupada in that purport clearly tells us we should not offend anybody. That's where this concept of Dadati Pratigranati Guhyama is important. You don't disrespect them. You stay a step away from them. You don't associate with them. But that doesn't mean you start blaspheming them. You start criticizing them, because that will start affecting your bhakti also. I think I brought up a concept that probably we could have brought up later, but did that help for you, Prabhu?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a generic term. I mean, though we are talking in the context of Mayavadis here, in general, what you're trying to say is do not disrespect anybody.
Yes, I'll send out that purport in the link. It's a very important purport to read, how Prabhupada explains that even though she didn't know that Dhruv was a devotee, and even I don't know anybody, right? You meet so many people. I was in Denver. I remember I saw a guy. He was like a homeless person. He was living on the street. He came to the temple. And can you imagine? He used to stink. He had a long beard, all ragged hair. He hadn't taken shower for months. He came to the temple. And then, I moved out of Denver. And then when I went back there after 6 months just for a visit, I wanted to meet some devotees. I saw him. And he was so effulgent, Prabhu, you'll not believe me. Clean shaven, clean head, clean, no beard, very beautiful dress, wearing devotee dress. And I felt like what a fool I was. I was thinking about him, that he's such a, what a guy is he, so ugly and so poorly dressed and stinking. Sorry, I'm going to mute some. It just my voice was kind of echoing. So I did that I was doing a foolish thing, and we might accidentally criticize devotees, and that will harm our bhakti. So yes, as you said, it's a generic thing. We are being highlighted Mayavadis and atheists here because of two of these reasons. Prabhupada, and let's talk about them. Political parties of the world take advantage of Mayavad and other atheistic philosophies to promote materialism and oppose Krishna consciousness. This is coming from Prabhupada's own experience. When he was trying to establish ISKCON, many political parties were against him. Not just political parties, many big groups, and what they were doing were they're taking support from these Mayavadis, taking support in the way that these Mayavadis would present philosophy in a way that would show Krishna conscious ISKCON in a bad light. So Prabhupada was very strict. Don't associate with them. They will misuse you. They'll misuse your innocence, right? So unless one is advanced, he is unable to utilize everyone's contribution to further the Krishna consciousness movement. We might think, oh, I might, benefit him by associating with him, or probably he might help me in bhakti, in pushing forward Krishna consciousness. But that's the job for Uttam Adhikaris, the topmost devotees. We cannot do that, because Prabhupada could come to Maya and he could pull people out of Maya. And whom kind of people? Drunkards, drug addicts, sex addicts, whatnot, illicit sex, everything they were doing, propagating. Prabhupada could come and he could pull them out of Maya because he was a pure devotee. If I go and try to pull them out of Maya, I will become a part of them because I am not pure, I am not strong. So Prabhupada is warning us, don't try to overdo it. Know where you stand, what your position is, and then take an action. So for us, people who are beginners, neophytes, just stay away from atheists, Mayavadis, and so that we know that we are not being fooled by them. And we cannot change them because we don't have that purity. So best to keep a distance from them. And this concept will be talked about more in the next verse, where Prabhupada will explain the three levels of devotees: Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam Adhikari. That will come to it. So this is, I think, this is what we had here. So that kind of covers the whole of this particular verse. A thing I would recommend to all of you to do is that just go home and think about what are the challenges that you are facing to follow these 6 items, right? What is it that obstructs or prevents you from pursuing these 6 items, right? Does that make sense? Do you want to try that out? There could be many factors. For example, for me, I have a private life and a public life, and I'm fearful that my public life will come out to my private life will come out to the public. So I'm some sense of duplicity in my heart. But you might have another reason what challenges you. So I'm requesting you to think about that. What are the challenges in facing these 6 items? Is that okay? Okay. I still see there's somebody by the name of RP iPhone. Can you please let me know who that person is? I just don't know who that person is. Can you who's that?
Haribol Prabhuji, it's Radhika Chitralekha. I'm sorry, I'd accidentally logged out and it
Okay.
I had to rename myself. Sorry about that.
No problem. I just yeah, because as I said, right, we take attendance also, and I get confused that who's that person.
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So that was the sum up of this particular verse, and as I said, just a request here again. Try to list 2 or 3 items that challenge you in following these 6 principles that have been given to us by Rupa Goswami. You don't have to share it if you don't like, but at least for your own introspection, it will be very helpful, and it will help you work on it. The first way to improve is to acknowledge that, okay, this is the challenge I'm facing, and then you start working on it. So that's the verse 4. We have a few minutes. I just wanted to quickly share the 5th verse. We won't go into details, but I just wanted to show you what it involves. And do I have it open now? Where's that verse 5? Any thoughts in the meantime? Any questions or anything that's in your mind?
Krishna Prabhuji, I have a question on the charity. So can you please explain, Madhav Seva versus Manav Seva? I get number of time when I was in the Sankirtan in the Inner Harbor, when I was just doing, somebody asked to me hey, there are a lot of beggars and all those things. So people some devotees guided me, no, Madhav Seva is bigger than the Manav Seva. So so can you please a little bit expand on that? Should we focus on the Madhav Seva or it should go both together?
So when you say, okay, so let me, so there's no harm in doing either of them, no harm in doing Manav Seva. That's okay. So just to kind of clarify it right in the beginning, right? It doesn't mean that we should not give charity to poor people or somebody who's actually in need, right? So that's not to be done. There's always a conflict. We always have this conflict of feeling like giving charity and then fearing that it may be misused, right? That's always in my mind, right? And then sometimes when you go on YouTube, there are so many videos that pop up that, oh, my child has cancer, or somebody says my child is dying, please help him. So should we offer to them or not, right? So there's so much about charity. What I want to tell you is that we don't have to give up social circles to come into devotional service, and vice versa. We don't have to give up devotional service to be a part of social circles. So we should not avoid charity in the name of bhakti. Charity is not opposed to bhakti. It is only opposed when charity is used to replace bhakti. Okay, we see Prabhupada feeding poor people. We have the Food for Life program. Millions of kids are fed every day, right? Prabhupada wanted to integrate social service with devotional service. That's why he brought in the food relief program. Some people don't like to give charity for temples. but give charity for food relief, right? So then what happens is agyat sukriti happens for them. So then they develop appreciation for Krishna and then devotees, and then it goes, So in the 12th chapter, Krishna even says that in a minimum, at least cultivate selflessness. So to answer your question, there's no harm in Madhav Seva, Manav Seva, but remember that they are not two separate things, right?
I see. Yeah,
They're not
the reason
separate.
is, just a little bit add on that, because when I was doing reaching out for this Gita distribution, we have once in a year. So I reach out to the people, good friend of mine, they say, hey, this cause is not enough good. That we were distributing Gita and we're going to reach out to every hotel and motel, all that places. So they refused actually to give. They say, hey, if you bring something to, you are doing some for human well-being and all these things, we'd love to donate it, but not for this cause. So I just wanted to get some little bit understanding, so how we can at least argue about that, or So
That's a very good point, Prabhu. Yes, I get that often. What I do, Prabhu, is you should always have these, as you would say, weapons in your armor, or arrows. That if somebody says that way, you should not tell them that, okay, we are going to use this money to print books necessarily. You can tell them that when they contribute, this money also goes to Food for Life program, for example. That's a very big thing that ISKCON does, Food for Life. Then another thing that I talk about people is about the Bhaktivedanta Hospital in India. Right? Bhaktivedanta Hospital treats thousands of people for free, and not just from Hindu background, from Christianity, Muslim. People come from all backgrounds to be treated there for free. So you have to judge the person whom you are talking to, and then accordingly bring out how their contribution will be to some worthy cause.
Got it.
So that's something we have to practically think. And I understand your challenge. I also have that many times. But you have to understand that once they give that money, it's for their benefit. Then even if you, let's say, presume that they say, oh yeah, it's going to Food for Life, and might be there, but then they are getting that agyat sukriti for sure. They are getting that benefit. It goes into their permanent record. So charity is not an external activity. Charity is it's a mentality. It's an inner disposition, right? And that's why, as I was explaining, right, even billionaires do charity. They are giving to causes. Warren Buffett gives, I don't know what, like $25 billion every year to Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, that Prabhuji is like a little bit controversial topic. They have the tax shelters there. They have a lot of other factors.
Yeah.
But
the concept of charity, I'm saying it's an inner disposition. Outwardly, yes, it may express differently. What I'm trying to say is that charity is a mentality.
Absolutely.
Right? So we have to understand that. And many times, I'll tell you a story. We have 2 minutes left. Once, Indradyuman Swami Maharaj, he was doing kirtan in Poland. Okay, Poland is a very poor country, and there were many kids who came and became a part of his chanting and that sankirtan, and they started dancing. And then after 15 or 20 minutes, those kids were leaving, and Maharaj asked them that, why are you leaving? And they said, oh, we have to go, we have to go work. And Maharaj asked them, what do you work? They said, we are beggars. We beg. We collect money. We have to collect so much money every day and give it to whoever is our manager. Maharaj immediately told his disciple that give them this much money, whatever they were supposed to collect for the whole day, right? Maharaj's disciple, being a neophyte like as I am, foolish and similar like me, he said, Maharaj, we should not give charity. This is Manav Seva, like what you were saying, right? We should not give them. They're beggars. We should not give them. Maharaj said, please give them. And Maharaj, they gave them, and then Maharaj later on explained to him that when you give money to them and they don't go for begging, they will be engaged in this in Mahaprabhu's movement, in this chanting process. So Maharaj was thinking of many steps ahead, which a disciple couldn't think of. So just to bring this example, that sometimes what would look like Manav Seva might be in the background Madhav Seva. So as I was saying earlier, they're not different, but we have to learn to, we have to be very cautious not to separate them out. Sorry, it was a long answer to your question, but just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, charity is a big topic, and I'll be happy to discuss it in more detail when we come into Bhagavad Gita. But yeah, we should not avoid giving charity. That's not the concept. Krishna himself promotes that.
So Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, like, so what should be our priority to give charity, like to the temple or to poor people? If we have some limitations, like we cannot give charity to everybody. So what should be our priority, to give to the temple or to poor people?
So that's something we have to think, that how is my money being used, right? For example, if somebody is poor and if you feel that your money is actually going to help him, there is no harm in giving that money. See, the purpose of bhakti, the purpose of charity is not to make our heart hard. If we try to become very, oh no, I won't give it to this guy, these beggars, they're useless, we'll not give it to him. And no, I only give to Krishna in the temple, I look at his beautiful form. That's not a devotee's heart. A devotee's heart is very soft. Sometimes even devotees do that, they give to poor people. I remember I heard from a devotee how Radhanath Maharaj, once he was in Mumbai, he was going in his car and there was a beggar on the street and he told the driver, give him some money, give the beggar some money. And the driver said, oh, I don't have anything. And Maharaj said, next time I want you to keep something in the car to give to that. If you don't, I'll take off your shirt and give it to him. So you see, it's all these pure devotees, their heart becomes so soft that it melts when they see people suffering and they want to help in whatever way possible. So we have to look at the situation, and depending on what the situation is, we should try to do good to others. Not just thinking that, oh, I'll give to a beggar, I will be in a karmic bondage, or this is karma, I'll get bondage. No, that doesn't work in bhakti. If karmic bondage was a challenge for us, my spiritual master would never initiate me because he takes all my karma at initiation.
Right.
So as a devotee, we should be clear of that it should not make our heart hard. We don't become heartless. But then also we don't become sentimental.
Right.
We have sentiments, but we let the intelligence direct them. So there is a difference between being a soft-hearted and a simpleton, somebody who's easily cheated. So we have to help in a tangible way. I know might not be a very clear answer, but then
No.
it's a very personal thing.